mistake. I should have never tried. I took the cake, finished every slice. I moved away, still paying off the fines for every day I shared. I left alive. I stared in the face, looking through my eyes. I'm moving at pace.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
The destiny of America is always safer in the hands of the people than in the conference rooms of any elite.
Sam Seder.
They are unanimous in their hate for me, and I welcome their hatred.
We must guard against the acquisition of unwarranted influence, whether sought or unsought, by the military-industrial complex.
The Majority Report with Sam Seder.
If I get the feeling you've been cheated.
It is Monday, March 19th, 2018. My name is Sam Seder. This is the 5-time award-winning Majority Report. We are broadcasting live steps from the industrially ravaged Gowanus Canal in the heartland of America, downtown Brooklyn, USA. On the program today, Nathan J. Robinson, editor-in-chief of Current Affairs, on Jordan Peterson, the intellectual we deserve. Also on the program today, Jeff Sessions fires FBI Deputy Director McCabe as Mueller attacks grow from the Trump administration. Meanwhile, another bombing in Austin, Texas, the 4th this month. Trump supposedly makes White House staffers sign NDAs. And surprise.
What a shock.
Facebook does not protect your data. New report. Class secondary to race and fate of black men in this country. And on the eve of the 15-year anniversary of the start of the Iraq War, the question remains, is Iran next? Lastly, Toys R Us, vultured to death by Mitt Romney et al. All that and more on today's program, ladies and gentlemen. I suspect you already sense that I am under the weather today. I will do my best to persevere through the entire show. It's quite possible I may just get through the interview. It's quite possible I may pass out during the interview. We shall see. I wanted to create that. They always say, you know, when you're doing when you want to create some suspense, is you leave a loaded gun. That's what you write that in the first 10 pages of the script. Put a loaded gun, maybe put it in you put it in the drawer of the desk, the bureau. And that's what we have here. I just loaded the gun, and I just put it. I said the gun is loaded, and I've just put it in the bureau.
This is sort of like when Michael Jordan had the flu in the playoffs.
Sort of, just sort of like that. Folks, I haven't taken a trip in a long time. Really, I haven't. It's been a long time.
May I suggest Dubai?
Yeah, well, there you go. Part of the reason why I don't travel, or at least in the past, is that all the planning. Like, how are you going to find a place to stay? It's just stressful to plan it and to book it. But there's a solution for this. You don't have to go to 20 different sites to figure this out now. Tripping.com, one search lets you compare every home from the world's top vacation rental sites in one place to find the best deal on your perfect vacation rental. Because nobody goes and stays at hotels anymore. Why would you do that? If you're going to go for like a couple of days, stay in somebody's house and be fully stocked. You can decide whether or not you go out to eat, cook there. I don't know. You go to the beach. Vacation rentals offer more. They offer you more privacy, more space for everybody under one roof, more choices, fully stocked kitchens, extra bedrooms, even hot tubs. Mm-hmm.
Nice.
Yeah. All the comforts of home and then some, like plus the hot tub. I don't have a hot tub in my home.
They're not hot tubs here.
I don't want to reveal too much, folks, but don't have a hot tub in my home.
Just at the studio.
Just at the studio.
Can we end early today?
I've got a cold, so we're going to have to call it off for today. Best of all, at tripping.com, you can join millions of travelers who find more savings with rates up to 80% less than traditional hotel rooms. So if you're going to spring break on the beach in Florida, tripping.com. Want to swim in Lake Tahoe this summer? That actually sounds like something I definitely want to do. Yeah. Tripping.com. You've ever been to Lake Tahoe? It's gorgeous.
Oh, really
It
want
is
to, though.
gorgeous. Dreaming of sitting on the deck of a Smoky Mountains cabin? Tripping.com. This year, save time and money when you book the vacation home of your dreams with tripping.com/majority. That's tripping, tripping.com/majority. Find your perfect vacation rental at tripping.com/majority. Check it out, folks. And, you know, it's like everything else I say. The best time to check out a vacation site, like tripping.com/majority, is when you don't need one. Get the lay of the land. Go in. See, maybe you get ideas of where to go.
Maybe when you're bored at work, you want something to look forward to in life.
Maybe not so much at work. Maybe it's best not to do it at work.
I'm sorry, what was that? Lake Tahoe does look good, guys.
Hold on for a second, folks. There's some pretty big news that we get from Fox and Friends today. Casey Shimkus brought us some of this report. So this is pretty... buckle up, folks, because it's about to get bumpy. You're not going to believe what's happening on Twitter.
All right, some of the trends this morning. Another Hollywood elite once again taking aim at the White House. Jim Carrey, the comedian, painting that portrait of
Pause
Sarah
it for one second. Now, what was the last thing that Jim Carrey... Is he doing anything?
I have no idea, but as I say, this portrait of Sarah Huckabee Sanders is his best work since In Living Color.
All right, so, I mean, he's a Hollywood elite. Taking on, I guess, the political elite,
It's
right? I mean,
lifetime
she's in the
title.
White House. But good.
Sanders as a monster, blasting her on Twitter as a so-called Christian whose only purpose in life is to lie for the wicked monstrous.
Well, here with the outrage lighting up social media is Fox News Headlines 24/7
Pause it.
reporter.
Wait a second. So there's more to this story, folks. It's not just that Jim Carrey painted a picture of Sarah Sanders Huckabee, or Sarah's Huckabee Sanders, and said that she does the work of a monster. There's more to the story, so we better bring in a correspondent, and here she is.
Media is Fox News Headlines 24/7 reporter Carly Shimkus. Carly, this is the
24/7.
actor Jim Carrey?
This is the actor-comedian Jim Carrey,
The
who
Dumb and
also
Dumber
does,
guy?
yeah, the Dumb and Dumber guy, who also does a lot of art on the side and has posted it to Twitter more and more frequently. He didn't mention Sarah Huckabee Sanders by name, but the general consensus is that is an unflattering drawing of her. About 9,000 comments have been written about this picture, and it's clear that the people who don't like the Hollywood folks talking about politics don't like this, and they're very ticked off about it. So I think we have some viewer comments on it.
All right.
Jamie on Twitter says, I wish you were still making movies so I could go not see them. Ian writes, to summarize, you're insulting a woman who worked for the world's most powerful office. You're mocking her appearance, and you're presuming to know more about her private faith, one held by millions of other Americans, simply by what you see on TV. But she's the monster. And then Amy writes, I will always stand by freedom of expression, but can we act our age and not call out people for their looks? And Tony simply says, Jim who? So some people say, you know, this is just downright bullying. Others are saying, hey, freedom of expression. He can do whatever he wants.
Absolutely. But
There you go, folks. Now you know the whole story. Tony Camato was like, Jim who?
I like those lines. I like the Jim who. And I mean, whatever, forget hypocrisy, blah, blah, blah. We always say that. But I do have to say there is something just particularly beautiful about Trump devotees being like, can we do better?
Right.
Criticizing people's looks.
Yeah. Also, like, for a TV station where every woman has to look like a fucking blonde Barbie doll to work there, I would say glass houses.
Oh, without a doubt.
I also like that that's literally her job. They're like, now here's the woman in the cocktail dress who reads idiots' tweets who watch the show.
But to be fair, she is 24/7. That's what she was brought on as the 24/7.
She was up all night.
So
doing
she was
that
up all
story.
night tracking the Jim Carrey story and pulling different reactions to the Jim Carrey story from like Tony and Amy. And
I love that humor structure too. That like, I wish you had a new movie so I could not see it.
Exactly. Well, it's
you don't
Inversion.
You don't not suck.
That's comedy.
there you go, folks. Now you know the rest of the story because a lot of people were emailing like, what's going on now with this whole Jim Carrey thing? And I just wanted to get it out there so that we wouldn't have this hanging over us over the course of the whole show. All right, we got to take a quick break. When we come back, I'm going to be talking to Nathan Robinson about Jordan Peterson and what is wrong with us
So much
that he is. And look, well, I'll tell Nathan this when we return. We'll be right back. Sam Seder, Majority Report. We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report on the phone. It's a pleasure to welcome to the program the editor-in-chief of Current Affairs, Nathan J. Robinson, on his piece, The Intellectual We Deserve. Welcome to the program, Nathan.
Thanks, Sam. Nice to be with you.
So I went out to dinner the other night, and I think I've told folks this story here, but I went out to dinner the other night with friends of mine, and they brought their 15-year-old nephew, who was going through a breakup with his girlfriend. And at age 15, you get a little bit upset about these things. And he's a very smart guy. He follows a lot of politics. And he said to me, a friend of mine sent me a Jordan Peterson video to help me feel better about things. And he goes, what's with that guy? He seems like an idiot. And I was both horrified and gratified. Gratified that he could see that this guy was a little bit thin, but horrified that he's being sent around to 15-year-olds as a way of making them feel better about their lives. So the timing of this piece couldn't have been better. For folks who don't know who Jordan Peterson is, tell us, just give us the thumbnail on him.
Well, he's a University of Toronto psychology professor in his mid-50s, and for the past sort of several decades, he's kind of been just an obscure academic. And in the last couple of years, he has developed first a huge cult following, and then a kind of far more mainstream following. Because the cult following because initially he had come out as a very strong opponent of Canada's efforts to add gender expression and identity to the Canadian Human Rights Act, and Peterson had suggested that if this was passed, he, as a professor, could be prosecuted for refusing to use students' preferred gender pronouns, and declared that he wouldn't ever use student preferred gender pronouns, well, unless under certain terms, he kind of qualified it. And then sort of it became a kind of free speech hero to certain people, and he has a YouTube channel where he records videos to his followers, and he kind of developed a huge following among young men in particular. About 90% of his viewers are men. And he got a lot of money on Patreon, tens of thousands of dollars a month, I think nearly approaching $100,000. And then he released a self-help book, 12 Rules for Life, which quickly shot to the top of Amazon and is, I think, still the number one most read book on Amazon at the moment.
Wow. Just getting back to that first, I guess, inciting breakthrough event, was the I'm not familiar with that Canadian provision that would have added gender identity to their Bill of Rights, but would that have criminalized Jordan Peterson's use of the improper pronoun?
There's no evidence that it would have. I mean, the provision actually is quite vague, and Peterson was suggesting that because it's vague, it could be used to prosecute it. Right? It just prohibits discrimination against people because of gender identity, and it was Peterson's interpretation that this could be used to prosecute him for refusing to use pronouns. But that's not in the bill. The bill literally just prohibits discrimination on gender identity.
So, all right, now let's go over a little bit of his work, because I mean, you introduced me to far more of it than I think I probably feel comfortable.
I'm so sorry.
Yes, apology accepted. But it's important because really the real question at the end of this is like, what is driving this stuff, or the appetite for this stuff? But before we get there, we should, sort of, and frankly, around these parts, we go through this with a little bit with Sam Harris, who you mentioned briefly in here. But there's a quality to Peterson that I think is shared by some online, and that is when you basically talk about that it's sort of hard to understand, to know what he's saying more often than not. Give us a couple of examples of that.
Well, but first, I think it's just important to understand that the self-help component of this is really, really important. So people might have been surprised, given what he became known for, which is, refusing to use pronouns, that he would release a book called 12 Rules for Life. But actually, for his followers, that's a hugely important part of what he does. The reason that your 15-year-old friend was being given Jordan Peterson's videos is because he structures this a lot around life advice. And his whole pitch is, his academic work is he's a Jungian, and he's giving Jungian interpretations of mythology and sort of showing the commonalities among human stories across time and coming up with all of the sort of lasting archetypes. But then he uses this and sort of translates this into a sets of advice especially for young men to get their lives in order. He's known for saying, clean your room and clean up your act and put your life together. So that's a really important part of it. But when you get down to what he's actually saying, this is tough because it's tough to understand. And if people look at the article, I've given tons of examples of Petersonian prose, which is almost uninterpretable. I have long passages. One passage is, Procedural knowledge generated in the course of heroic behavior is not organized or integrated within the group and the individual as a consequence of simple accumulation. Procedure A appropriated situation 1 and procedure B appropriated in situation 2 may clash in situation 3. Under certain circumstances, intrapsychic or interpersonal conflict emerges and moral reevaluation becomes necessary where behavioral options are rank ordered, and this organization is in its concrete, abstract, intrapsychic, and interpersonal variance occurs as a consequence of, quote, war. The Maps of Meaning is 600 pages, and it's full of this stuff. And, getting to the bottom of what he's saying is really difficult, and that's part of it. That's a huge part of it, because what it means is that people can project their own interpretations onto it, and that means he can appear more insightful than he actually is, because you are working to struggle to figure some meaning, and then when you discover it, you feel like he must be really smart, and that you must be really smart for having discovered it.
Right, and the meaning that you've discovered is really more of like a reflection of yourself than it is what he's saying. I mean, as far as I read that passage there, he's saying there's such a thing as cognitive dissonance, and when you have two competing values in yourself, you have to resolve it.
Yeah, right. So this is one of the most important things here. Is it's not that there isn't meaning to the passages. There are things that he says that are perfectly true. It's just that they're kind of really obvious, and they're not original intellectual contributions. And the way I liken it to someone who takes all of your possessions and buries them, and then gives you a set of instructions for where to find them, and then you find them, and you're really thankful to the person, or someone who kidnaps someone you love, and then you're thankful to get it. You're like, no, this was mine to begin with, right? I knew this already. And what Peterson does is to make it seem as if he's presenting you with something original that actually we all know.
Yeah, I like this where he says, in the purely intrapsychic sphere, such conflict often emerges when attainment of what is desired presently necessarily interferes with attainment of what is desired or avoidance of what is feared in the future. In other words, sometimes your short-term and long-term goals conflict.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Which is true. Right?
Yes, it's absolutely
it's
true.
Not wrong.
Yes, I think most people probably, this is something that you understand as you get out of your teenage years. When you start to realize maybe I like to party, but I also might want to, establish some, a career or something. Oh, I guess I'm not going to be able to go out and drink all night tonight, so I get up and go to work tomorrow. I mean, that's basically what we're talking about here. And
but if you phrase it that way, nobody would praise you as a brilliant intellectual. They would just be going, "Oh, that's a guy who seems relatively sensible." But if you buried that within a lot of convoluted language, people would actually think you were a sage.
Now, let me ask you this: does he you're putting these things in italics because he uses italics, you say, a lot. To make it sound like the way that he's using a word is very different from the way the sort of the pedestrian usage of the word. I mean, just explain that tactic.
So that's a common thing in academic writing. I'm just looking through the Maps of Meaning book right now, and I see a mandrake root has the nature of a man because it has the shape of a man, shape being italicized, or things that both cause fear, and then he explains the attribution of femininity. Attribution is italicized. That serve to undergird the idea of lawful authority. And every time it's put in italics, because if you put something in italics, and I've done this before in my writing, because it's very effective, actually, because if you put something in italics that's actually very simple, people think, well, they must mean something. That must be very meaningful because they put it in italics. So it's just a small thing. That's just a tiny thing, but it's a thing that you can notice throughout his writing. And actually, it's something to be on guard for a lot. Is people trying to be insightful? As I say, I've used it by drawing your emphasis, by emphasizing particular things.
Okay, so and as we go through this. You also give examples of like where he says something that is then he immediately is upset that it's misinterpreted, I guess, right? Like this would be the I'm trying to go through here and see where's a good example of that is the Toronto woman who calls him a Nazi, let's say, or all right, go.
Well, there are a few examples of this, right? One is that the big one is chaos and order, right? One of his entire frameworks is chaos and order, and the world is divided into the chaotic and the ordered. His book is called An Antidote to Chaos, and in it he says, chaos is associated with the feminine. Order is the masculine, and order is the structure of society. It's it's the glue that holds everything together. Order is that social structure. And you think from that, well, order is really good, and he's saying that women are just chaos, and we have to have an antidote to femininity, right? If chaos is femininity, and he's offering an antidote, that suggests that he's like against femininity. Then, of course, he contradicts that. He comes and goes, no, I'm saying that it's like yin and yang. You've got to have order and chaos at the same time, which makes the whole thing kind of meaningless, because then you go, well, what are you really saying then? If we're not trying to stop chaos, we're just trying to incorporate it, it all becomes kind of a soup. So usually either if the thing he's saying that seems specific seems horrifying or wrong, and then the qualified version that seems so abstract and convoluted as to not have any practical import. And you mentioned the Nazi thing. Peterson says in one passage, he said, he says something about the physicality undergirding everyday interaction. He says basically everyday interactions are built on a foundation of looming violence. And interactions between men always have a looming threat of violence. And he says, for example, there is a woman in Toronto, and he talks about how you can't use violence on women. He says, there's a woman in Toronto who compares him to a Nazi, and he says, I can't use the tactics, the techniques on her that I would use against a man because they're forbidden, i.e. physicality, physical violence. So that seems like he's saying, well, I wish I could hit this woman, but there's a social taboo against it. But then if you say, are you saying you wish you could hit a woman? He would go, no, of course not. I'm just saying that the looming threat of physicality is essential to the whatever. And so you try and pin him down on things that sound horrifying, and he denies them. And what it means is that there's an ability for people to interpret his words to justify really horrifying things. You see people endorsing domestic violence in the comments of his videos a lot. And that interpretation is reasonable because he's so vague.
I mean, this is, there's a dynamic here, and I want to broaden this out in just a moment, but there's a dynamic here that we, you could see almost with Donald Trump, right? Like he goes out and articulates certain ideas that then give license to people to take it further. And that's sort of the dynamic that's happening, why guys like this are so dangerous in some fashion, right? Because they are opening the door to certain ideas. And of course, this isn't about debate, but they are also simultaneously not owning those ideas and giving people, giving basically another concentric circle out there the license to go out and practice these ideas.
Yeah. So you're totally right, and I think so. Someone emailed me who likes Peterson and said it was very unfair of me and unethical even to judge Peterson by his fans. To say, well, you have to judge him. You can't do what the fans are saying. But there's something. But the Trump comparison is exactly right. It's like if I had fans and my fans were all wearing swastikas, I would be very alarmed, and I would be wondering what I was doing that was not at least maybe not endorsing, but at least not repelling that type of person. Right? And the same thing with Trump and the white supremacists, where he was giving all these messages where they loved him. David Duke loved Donald Trump. Richard Spencer, very excited about Donald Trump. And, that's not because Trump was, saying explicitly racist things. It was because he was saying things, the sort of things that racists like to hear. And then you could go, okay, well, it's not his fault they liked him, but then all of his statements on it were very sort of qualified, very going, well, who knows who's my fan? I don't know who's my fan. But it's like, we are responsible for the consequences of what we say to a certain degree and for the predictable consequences of what we say. So, for example, in current affairs, sometimes like people on the alt-right have picked up our articles, like Mike Cernovich or someone, have liked the things that we've said. And when that happens, I try very hard to say, no. This is not what we're saying. We are not this. This is not a fair interpretation of what we're saying. It's really, really important that you make sure that you are not fueling something horrifying. So I think we do have a certain responsibility for that. I think that's one of the things with Peterson, where he's not saying anything that's explicitly white supremacist. He's just saying a lot of things, again, that white supremacists really kind of like.
Right, and it's, I mean, this is the idea of being a public intellectual, right? Is that you do take responsibility for how you're interpreted on some level. I mean, obviously, you shouldn't mold what you do based upon narrow sets of people's interpreting. Some people are always going to misinterpret, but right. And here's, I want to just move in, and before we sort of like broaden this out even more, when he's talking about and this I've just found fascinating, when he was interviewed by this Channel 4 interviewer, Newman, and you say that largely that interview may not have been that fair because she put words in his mouth or something, but there was one or two exchanges they had, particularly around the idea of him comparing left-wing, I guess, social justice warriors to Mao. But there was another part where he said, which I thought was really fascinating, where he wrote, like, liberalism got flipped so that the world was turned into one group against another, power struggle from one group against another, and then the social justice warrior types and lefties, even the Democratic Party, started categorizing everybody according to their ethnic or sexual or racial identity and made that canonical element of their being. And the only thing I could think was, where was this guy for the other 200 years of the American project? Right? Like, the idea of categorizing people as, let's say, black or, Chinese or minorities or women and giving them a set of rules was the founding of this country. Right? Like, you're black, you're a slave, you're a woman, you're a property of your husband, you don't get to vote. Like, for someone to say that seems that they have a huge blinders on some level. Right.
Yeah, thinking that, like, feminism is what decided that women were different from, women had different interests from men. So 2 points. First, what you said, this interview with Channel 4, it's funny because all of his fans, and he got a lot more fans after this interview because people saw it as an example of someone in the press treating him very unfairly. Because all through the interview, the interviewer is saying, so you're saying X? And X will be something like, so you're saying women just can't compete with men? And he'll go, no, that's not what I'm saying. And they go, look, see how unfair the interview is? But actually, all interviewers of Jordan Peterson end up saying, so you're saying X? Because Jordan Peterson is really unclear all the time, right? You kind of have to put words in his mouth because you're trying to figure out what words are coming out of his mouth. And, so when he says, the social justice ideology was responsible for is the ideology that was responsible for the Soviet Union, you go, wait, are you saying that it's the same? And then he goes, no, I'm not saying that it's the same. And then they go, so what are you saying? So I think it's not necessarily that unfair to him to try and do the so you're saying thing. But as you say, there is this, substantively, there's this total lack of knowledge of history. He doesn't even understand what activism is, right? So in this other interview, he says, basically, activism, he says this thing started in the 60s where you would go out and hold paper on sticks and shake it at people and to signal your virtue. And you go, that was the civil rights movement. That's what that was. Like these guys holding, I don't know what they're doing, standing there holding signs. That seems ridiculous. You know, it was the anti-war and the civil rights movement. That's what that was. It's so strange that he can't even understand, like, what the roots of activism were. He can't even see it from the point of view of the activists. He doesn't even really seem to understand what politics are. Like, he talks about, like, getting rid of ideology and the importance of examining yourself rather than getting involved in politics. And people have said to him, well, if you don't like the social justice movement, you know, what do you think political activism should consist of? And his answer is basically like, well, you should clean up your room and examine your own life and your goals, right? He just fundamentally doesn't comprehend why women and black people and other people of color might be upset, like what they're frustrated about the arrangement of contemporary society.
I would also add that the protests, the idea of putting a stick in paper did not start in the 60s. There have been protests in this country since, well, the Tea Party, right? I mean, the idea that there haven't been protests, I mean, the shirtwaist, the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire, which, you know, I mean, it's sort of extraordinary because what he's really talking about is like, and he's not talking about age because those women in the you know, in 19, whatever it was, 19 were in their teens. He's talking about like hippies and black people, it seems like.
Yeah. So it's just a lack of understanding of the context. He thinks that, like, again, and this is common to criticisms of identity politics, which and it really frustrates me, is this failure to understand why people think that identity is somewhat important. You know, if you examine the Black Lives Matter, for example, has put out a very serious policy agenda where they talk about the police reforms they'd like to see, they talk about what the things they'd like to see done to address the black-white income gap and the wealth gap, and employment discrimination. These are the sort of serious issues that people in social justice movements are discussing, and they do disproportionately affect people by race. And so people like Peterson, who are critics of social justice, just go, well, why do you keep talking about race? And they explain in detail why they keep talking about race, why we can't pretend that race doesn't matter. But Peterson doesn't really respond to those arguments or even show any sign of comprehending them. And this is very common among the people like Ben Shapiro and the people like Charles Murray, who all say, well, this identity thing, it's racism of its own. And they're like, well, at least pay attention, at least try and understand, like, what people are saying about, like, the unique issues that face women and people of color.
All right, well, so let's talk about what it says about us or American society. Like, why? And there seems to be, I mean, a series of these people who, I mean, what is it that is? What's wrong with us that that this guy who is not really saying much, and to the extent that he is just sort of like giving license to some pretty noxious tendencies, has become so successful and almost more important than his just sort of like marketing success. You go through in the first couple of paragraphs of how he has, like, there is, you know, folks like Malcolm Gladwell saying he's a wonderful psychologist. I don't know how Malcolm Gladwell could possibly know that. I mean, unless he's been treated by him. But you know, the Times saying his message is overwhelmingly vital, deserves to be taken seriously. Why is he getting these type of accolades? You know, I understand why he's getting YouTube hits, because YouTube is predominantly male, and there's a lot of young males on YouTube. But why is he getting these other accolades?
Well, okay, so yeah, the YouTube thing, that is puzzling in and of itself, or at least worth discussing in and of itself, right? His following among his extraordinary following among this group of young men. I mean, the cynical interpretation is, well, young men like it when you come along and flatter their worldview and say, like, you're the Ubermensch and feminists are trying to drag you down and stoke people's prejudices. Peterson says, and I think he is somewhat correct about this, that he appeals to people who are lost and adrift and lack sort of purpose and guidance in life. Even the jacket of his book pitches him as a father figure. And so I do have a sort of partial explanation for his following that says, well, he is sort of a product of a time when a lot of young people especially are very adrift. It's an economy that isn't working for them. It's a place of political and cultural meaninglessness, and there is a big market for someone to come along and go, look, I'm going to help you. I'm going to fix your life. I'm going to give you a sense of purpose. You're going to be a hero. So I do think that there are economic and social explanations in part for why he's attracted such a following. I actually think it's less of a mystery why the press would praise him, because I'm pretty cynical about the mainstream press. And I think any time someone comes along who looks like an intellectual and has a following, I mean, look at the way that the New York Times has covered like these white supremacist doofuses, where they all get like long form profiles. Right. So there is a sense that whenever there's a social phenomenon, the press feels like as part of its objectivity mandate, it has to take it very seriously and it can't just write it off. And so Peterson, the people have declared Peterson an intellectual, therefore he must be an intellectual. And the press sort of doesn't want to appear elitist and tries to reflect public opinion in a lot of ways, and this is kind of a result of that. I don't know why Malcolm Gladwell. All I can say is I don't. It diminishes my respect for Malcolm Gladwell's ability to tell truth from nonsense. But I think that a lot of these guys come along every generation and get hailed as the next whoever, who don't actually have much substance to them. In part because of the separation of academia from popular intellectualism, where academics aren't engaging with Jordan Peterson because academics couldn't care less about Jordan Peterson. They know that he's not substantive, but academic journals are a separate world from the popular press, and so this is also why you see a lot of bad science journalism, is because science journalists aren't scientists. There's a big separation between these worlds, which I think is bad.
Is this a new phenomenon? I mean, I talk to I've spoken just casually, socially, to professors of religion and professors and to neuroscientists actually, and like actual neuroscientists. And I bring up, let's say, the name of Sam Harris, and they're just like, who? What? I've never heard of this person. Yet like within, and maybe it's, the circles that I am exposing myself to, or, like, is there, but there really does seem to be this huge chasm where I feel like any of these neuroscientists, like, they work at Columbia, they do experiments on people's brains, could just say like, what? No, that's nonsense. I don't have time to engage in this, but what is on YouTube? You're like, and like, a professor of religion would be like, what? He's talking about the Hadith. Yeah. What are you, what? No, of course not. And yet we don't, there's this chasm. Is this phenomenon new? Is it a function of social media in some way that you can create a huge following with a veneer of expertise because you're swimming in circles that you're not going to bump into an actual expert?
Yeah, I think so. It's funny. That's so funny because, to many people, Sam Harris is the most famous neuroscientist in America.
Yes.
And, so it's so funny that neuroscientists don't really take him seriously. But that's, it's hard to know what the actual explanation for, I can conjure different theories as to why this is happening. Maybe it's because a lot of academic fields have gotten much more technical as they've gotten much more advanced. So the things that a neuroscientist is focused on today are that many more levels removed from things that ordinary people are ever going to be able to understand. I do place some of the blame for this on academics themselves, because there is a kind of sense among many academics that engaging with the public is something that is at best optional and at worst actually almost anti-intellectual, which is weird, right? I was in a graduate program in sociology, and I'm still in it actually, but there's a kind of contempt in the academic departments a lot of times for people who write, quote, popular books instead of academic books, and people who publish with popular presses rather than academic presses, which is very strange because you think, well, popular should be a good thing. Getting your message out is really important. And I think academics need to see it as much more that of having a responsibility of trying to guide the public's understanding of their field, because otherwise, people who are charlatans, or at least are very superficial, they will be the public spokespeople for a field. And so it's super important that if you do know about something, you take control. And it's depressing to me that, I mean, I've written long pieces about, like, Charles Murray and Jordan Peterson, and I'm not an expert in their field, and I wish that people who were already doing that, so I wouldn't have to.
Yeah, it's strange. I mean, and I wonder if it's also a function of, like, there's no reward in academia for doing this. And that the competition could be such that, like, I'm not going to expend energy on something that is tangential to my academic project. I mean, I wonder if that's how much that is involved. So what? I mean,
that's a huge part because all of the incentives are towards publishing in academic journals, which is basically the only thing that you're supposed to do as an academic to get accolades, right? It's just publish. They don't even value teaching. Your teaching is not something you're supposed to focus on. Writing op-eds in newspapers, it's all a distraction. You need to publish academic articles.
Does this put the left in a disadvantage long term? Because I mean, I think, statistically speaking, maybe short of economics, academics tend to be center left because just of the nature of the project, I guess. Is there a long term, are we going to be at disadvantage? Like, I mean, now that there is an ability to become, in the ease in which someone like a Jordan Peterson or a Sam Harris or even like, Stefan Molyneux had this going on for a while, a little bit more cultish perhaps. But there's these outlets for folks like this who are ostensibly thoughtful to reach the masses and make a tremendous amount of money, and without really being debunked. I don't know. Is the left at a disadvantage in this sense?
Well, the left is always at a disadvantage, right? Because the left is speaking for the people who don't have power. Right, so we're always going to be fighting uphill, and so yeah, we are, and of course it's gotten worse with the kind of cable newsification of knowledge, and this is the thing that climate scientists complain about, is that when you have a crossfire type discourse on television, if you look at the difference between, say, William Buckley's firing line in the 60s and Fox News in 2018, it's a huge difference because it's, 2 minutes versus an hour, and in 2 minutes you can't really expose someone as a fraud. It takes depth, right? My article's 11,000 words. As things get compressed, it's much more difficult to challenge these things, and as attention spans get shorter. At the same time, we have a formidable opportunity with the expansion of things like YouTube and podcasting and what have you, because it does allow you to do things that are in more depth, right? In current affairs, I was able to start a magazine that does in-depth analysis. And we've built up a decent following, and that's very possible. And podcasts are the same way. You can go for an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, and you can really dive into things. So I don't think it's impossible to take these guys on, but I think it's a formidable challenge, and one that I think everyone who has knowledge has a duty to help spread knowledge and challenge people who are presenting things that aren't knowledge as knowledge.
Nathan J. Robinson, Current Affairs on The Intellectual We Deserve. Thanks so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Sam.
All right, folks, going to take a quick break here. Head into the fun half, wherein I will peak out at 101.7 degrees on my fever. And we've got, what do we got? We got this Cambridge Analytica whistleblower on Channel 4. We've got Hannity on Fox and Friends. That's like one of those crossover episodes where your favorite characters from both shows show up at the same place. No, we've got like a whole show full of these guys. Ben Shapiro, Peter Thiel. Folks, this program relies on your support. You can be supportive of this program by becoming a member at jointhemajorityreport.com. And when you become a member, we say thank you. And we say thank you by giving you extra content every day. JoinTheMajorityReport.com. Also, JustCoffee.coop. Fair trade coffee, tea, or chocolate. Use the coupon code MAJORITY. Get 10% off. Check out TMBS. It is on tomorrow night on our YouTube channel. You can just subscribe to it right away on iTunes. You can do that right now. That way, it'll automatically come to your phone or your computer device.
And just for MR people, Matt Binder's going to be in tomorrow. So
Matt
a little
Binder.
reunion
Go.
Of sorts.
Matt Binder, public shaming. Matt was very helpful for me. I don't know if I mentioned this, but I recounted the story as I was talking. There are people writing about Mike Cernovich and
Mike Cernovich.com.
It's coming up, but Matt Binder was one of the first people I contacted when I heard from MSNBC that they were concerned about my tweet. And I was like, hey, dude, do you know how to like find other tweets that I had said at that time? It was 9 years before, and I wasn't sure. So he came back with a couple of tweets that showed the context in which I was suggesting that if my daughter was going to be raped, that it be by a older and very accomplished film director.
He sat back and he mainlined a
and of course,
Monster Energy drink.
Yep.
Got to work. We're going to do a Matt versus Matt contest, actually.
Oh, really?
Yes. Old Matt versus new Matt.
Jamie's Patreon, available at patreon.com/Jamie Peck.
Yeah, I also wanted to make the point that everything is free. I know it's located at Patreon, but you only have to give me money if you want to.
Whoa, there you go, folks.
You can just read my writing. That's more than enough for me.
Free riders, welcome. So check it out today. All right, going to take a quick break. Head into the fun half, 646-257-3920, 646-257-3920. We will take your phone calls and your IMs.
Ella es muy bella.
Yes, ladies and gentlemen, no. No. It's the fun half of the Majority Report. I'm going to try and calm down a little bit. Don't want to get too far out in front of my skis. Is that
That's my new Jordan Peterson impression.
when he was crying about the... we didn't get into this, the Illinois primary tomorrow. Lipinski, right? Isn't that tomorrow?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know it's Lipinski. I didn't know it was...
I wonder if there wasn't some inciting event with Jordan Peterson. Usually these things are usually when you get stuff like this, it's predicated on some life event that happens to people where they make they construct a broad social critique based upon an experience that they had.
I'm
right?
just trying to fight against chaos represented by Jamie so that the show can go on.
I mean, that to me, like these theories to me sound like somebody who had some problems in some interpersonal relationships with a woman.
That's a charitable explanation.
Well, I'm
it's
not
actually super uncharitable.
I don't know. I don't think it's that charitable. I think
charitable.
particularly if you're an intellectual and you start to make broad theories based upon the fact that, like, I don't know, your first fiance dumped you, or
I didn't get a hand job till I was 19.
Or what?
The individual Sultan Eaton.
Whatever. I have no idea.
She called me a Nazi and I can't choke her.
And I just want to make it. I want to make it. I want to make
better
this
to
absolutely
do it
clear.
in impression.
I'm just speculating because there's been moments where he seems very emotional about these things, far more emotional than one would anticipate.
I am me, your theories, and I'll do it as an
I mean, you cry about Social Security reports.
That's exactly right.
That's true. It's true.
What happened to you?
Well, it was, I was told for a long time that I wouldn't have Social Security by the Reagan administration.
There's always a sense of violence that lurks over faculty meetings. The sense of raw simian rage of frustrated 50-something academics, and we know that things could turn physical at any moment. But with women, you can't choke a bitch.
I mean, I guess he could just be a privileged and ignorant asshole, but it's more charitable.
Oh, no,
to
there's
say
definitely other stuff going on
that
with him.
He's
than that.
got some deep-seated personal problems.
Oh, no, there's clearly, there's much more pathos to him than just privilege.
That's what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, definitely.
All
That is
right.
true.
So you're saying that if you, instead of just like shooting off the cuff, if you had like some traumatic incident that you have then extrapolated as being sort of some type of broad truth, that's more sympathetic. Okay, fair enough. Calling from a 210 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
It's John from San Antonio. Good afternoon, Sam.
John from San Antonio. How are you? What's on your mind?
I'm good. Tonight, Bernie Sanders will hold a town hall called Inequality in America, the Rise of Oligarchy and the Collapse of the Middle Class, featuring Elizabeth Warren, filmmaker Michael Moore, and Derek Hamilton, an economics and urban policy professor at the New School in New York City. It will take place at 7 p.m. Eastern and will be broadcast on the Young Turks.
I should say this
Tomorrow,
also, John, hold on one second, that Derek Hamilton was actually, we were supposed to have him on the phone the other day with Sandy Dirty, but we couldn't, our phones didn't work. But go ahead.
Yeah, it was last Monday.
Yeah.
All right. Tomorrow, the primaries in Illinois will happen, and one of the biggest bellwether races for the left will take place in the 3rd District, where our revolution endorsed Maureen Newman faces awful conservative Democrat Dan Lipinski. Here's a quote from Bernie Sanders on the Maureen Newman candidacy. Maureen Newman has made it clear that she will be a champion for working families in Illinois, which is why I'm proud to support her. In Congress, Marie will fight for Medicare for all, $15 an hour minimum wage, and providing workers with benefits such as paid sick leave, while protecting Medicare and Social Security. She will defend women's rights, LGBTQ rights, and ensure immigrants will have a safe path to citizenship. I am proud to stand with Marie and look forward to continuing her to fight alongside her on these other critical issues once she's elected to Congress. And Dan Lipinski has voted with Trump 35% of the time, which is the 11th highest percentage among all Democrats in the House. In contrast, 11 of the best Democrats only vote with Trump less than 10% of the time. Bernie Sanders has voted with Trump 11.9% of the time, which is the fifth least amount voting with Trump in the Senate. Lipinski is also rated 171 out of 192 in Progressive Punch. He's
horrible. He's horrible. But let me ask you this: do you think what are Newman's chances?
I think it's a pure toss-up race. I mean, Sanders won the race won that district by 8 points. Newman's raised over $1 million. Unfortunately, Lipinski already had over $1 million in his coffers before the race started. But it's a pure toss-up. So this is really a huge race for the left. I mean, this is huge. So it's really important to go out and vote for.
Super big.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, because I mean there aren't that many races where an Our Revolution candidate is going to could possibly take out a conservative Democrat or even some moderates. I mean most of them are challenging in red districts. So this is huge. Our Revolution has also endorsed Daniel Biss for governor. Biss states it on his website that health care is a universal right, and that's why we need Medicare for all. Unfortunately, billionaire J.B. Pritzker leads in the latest polling by Victory Research with 32%. Chris Kennedy is at 26%. Biss gets 22%, but there are 16% undecided. So also, Our Revolution has endorsed Chuy Garcia in the Illinois 4th District. Chuy is a big supporter of Bernie in the 2016 campaign, and he is the favorite to win this seat. If Chuy is elected, this will continue the trend of electing more progressive candidates in heavily Hispanic areas that started in the Texas 16th race with the election of Veronica Escobar, endorsed by Our Revolution Texas, and Sylvia Garcia in the 29th District of Texas. In the 5th District, Justice Democrats endorsed Samina Mustafa is running against Democratic incumbent Mike Quigley. Mustafa has raised over $121,000, which is more than the two other Democrats in the race. Quigley has voted with Trump 22% of the time, which is the 58th worst record out of any Democrat. And in the 7th District, Justice Democrats in Chicago West Side, near West Suburban branch of DSA, has endorsed Anthony Clark. He's running against Danny Davis, who's actually has a decent voting record, but Clark will be an improvement, and I encourage people to vote for him. And in the 13th District, Justice Democrats have endorsed Dr. David Gill, who will face three other Democrats in this seat held by Republican Rodney Davis. One of the things I like
What
about
do you know
Gill,
about Londrigan in the 13th?
I know she's raised, I think it's a lady, right? I think she's raised the most money. Yeah, Betsy Dirksen Londrigan. Yeah, she's raised the most money, and she's probably the favorite. Right. I don't really know her issue set. I just kind of focus on the Our Revolution candidates mostly, and Justice Democrats. But yeah, she's the favorite. All
right. Well,
but anyway,
big day tomorrow in Illinois.
Yeah, definitely. And for the down ballot races, I would encourage people to go to the Our Revolution Illinois website and look at all of the endorsements for the down ballot people, state senate, state representatives, and even more down ballot races.
Right. Thanks, John. Appreciate it.
Okay, sure thing. All right, thank you.
I don't know how he does it.
I don't know either.
I don't know how he does that.
No.
Calling from a 610 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam, it's Del from Philadelphia. How's it going?
Who is it?
Del from Philadelphia.
Del?
From Philadelphia.
Okay, Del, what's on your mind?
Yeah, I was just watching a clip of Hillary Clinton in India, She was basically saying that she won in places that mattered and places with more optimism, and she was kind of still not taking any responsibility for the election.
Right.
And the Hill had an article on her campaigning possibly for Democrats in the midterms, and I'm just wondering how this is possible. Like, how, after everything we've been through, after all the damage that Trump's done, from Supreme Court to ICE, how Democrats still haven't learned that lesson, and how Democrats could possibly think it would be a good idea to.
Well, all right.
bring
Well,
her out
here,
on the
let me respond to you. I mean, your phone's not great, so I'm going to hang up on you, but I'll respond. First off, there's a couple of things that I take issue with. This notion of Democrats learning a lesson. Like, I don't know who you mean by Democrats in this instance.
Oh, he means the Democratic Party establishment,
but
I think.
Right now, like, running against the DCCC is like a good move in a Democratic primary, right? Like, running it, coming out and saying that I'm running against DCCC, running against Nancy Pelosi is not a bad move in some of these districts.
Well, it is and it isn't, right? Because then they can release Oppo research on you.
Sure, but so won't the Republicans. I mean, the point being that there are people, and look, I didn't think it was helpful for Hillary Clinton to be going out there and making the point that, like, places like Pennsylvania's 18th are irrelevant the day before a big race in Pennsylvania's 18th. I mean, that's just bad politics. But to the extent that someone running for Congress makes a determination that it's helpful to have Hillary Clinton in their district, that individual will take the responsibility for it and know their district. I mean, if Hillary Clinton beat Donald Trump in a district where I'm running as a congressperson, then yeah, I'm going to have her come.
Hi, Hillary.
Hi.
Let me explain. I think I have a little bit of a. So I actually made the same point the other day that, like, it's district by district with her, and I buy that. And I think that there is obviously some element of, like, there's two crazy cults, and one cult loves her, which is bizarre, and there's one cult that hates her, and they're both kind of imbalanced. But the problem that I really had with those statements that she made in India is I think that in the public mind, like, in the last 30 years, there's been two things that are definitely not necessarily connected, but they are connected in the public mind because they've happened at the same time, which is that there's been some real advancements that are now under attack, obviously, on, gay rights as an example, and a certain expansion of like multiculturalism and inclusiveness that has also come at the same time as globalization has wrecked the economy and livelihoods of a lot of people. So I think it's our job, really fundamentally, lesson or not lesson, to de-link those two things. And Hillary Clinton at literally a tech summit in India trashing a part of the country who are behind economically in the context of correctly attacking racism and sexism is a horrible message. Yes. And a problem. So I mean, it's legitimate to criticize her.
I totally agree. I said it the day before the race when those
no, but I think that's the part that goes beyond her as a personality in this endless processing of her.
I get it. Bad comments for whomever is a high-profile Democrat, particularly the timing, was just ludicrous. And fortunately, there was like 12 stories that day about Donald Trump, firing whatever it was. And so nobody reported on it until, like, briefly it filtered out for the rest of the week. And she's doing this in India. But I think, like, the significance of it probably greater for people who are just, tired of Hillary Clinton than for the party, because I don't think
you don't see a through line between that comment and overlap with Chuck Schumer saying, for every voter we lose in a blue collar district, we pick up a suburban Republican.
I think that was Ed Rendell, but
no, Chuck Schumer said
Chuck Schumer said it too.
Yes.
Yeah, I do think that's I think that is a problem, but it's not the same. I mean, look, just politically speaking, Chuck Schumer is saying some inside baseball as to like we're trying to appeal to these people as opposed to those people. Like Hillary in that speech or that question answer period was literally basically saying like they don't matter because they don't drive the GDP, and that is like, I think there is a problem with Chuck Schumer in terms of like where they're fishing for what message they think can resonate and where they think they're getting those votes. I mean, we quite saw that it did not happen. It did not work out that way in 2016. But there's another sort of like the argument that she's making is not.
Also, I have one more question for you. I feel like, do you ever you have a problem with people say like learn a lesson in almost like a moral way, which I get is bizarre, but like literally learn a lesson, like devise a better electoral strategy. That's a totally different thing.
Right. But it's also like, there's
you
a
should
presumption.
Theoretically always be learning lessons to improve performance.
Right? But there's a presumption there that like, that they just couldn't figure it out. Like, no, the people who ran, Chuck Schumer doesn't run on that because he thinks this is a good electoral strategy. It's because he has ideological priors that make him want to believe that and try and make that the outcome.
And he has campaign contributions to match his ideology.
Well, I mean, yes, because people see like, oh, he's one of me, I'm going to give money. It doesn't work the other way around. Chuck Schumer doesn't have to change Chuck Schumer's not selling out. This is who Chuck Schumer is. And they're just saying like, oh, you're like me, I'm going to give you money. And so really what has to happen is, people just sitting around waiting for Democrats to learn a lesson. No, the lesson has to be learned by people who want to get rid of those people. And that means like you have to take their jobs, like literally take their jobs. That's the lesson that needs to be learned. They're not going to learn a lesson because their lesson is just like, how do I further my ideological perspective or my perspective? It's not, if they genuinely believe, like there's nobody there going like, I'm willing to work against the success of the party just so that I can maintain my power. No one has that level of consciousness. They just think that like, oh, I'm right. This is, and I'm going to, shape the world in the way that I think it should be.
Also, it's less risky to be wrong this way, which is an interesting point that Ryan Grimm makes. That like if you just do the same strategy over and over again and you fail, so what? But if you try something new,
you could apply this
ass covering
to every institution in the world. Like the day I got on a sitcom was the day it became eminently easier for me to get the second sitcom, the third sitcom. Like, I'm not going out on a limb. ABC hired him. I'm NBC. I'm going to hire him. Boom. It's like so much easier at that point, and you just got to lock into that first job.
Well, this is why we make the distinction between reforming the Democratic Party and taking it over in a hostile fashion. Like, I don't think we're going to change people like Chuck Schumer. I think we just need to replace them.
Well, but the way you reform a party, in my mind, is you take it over. Like, there is no party that's just out there. It's just a series of individuals who have jobs.
I guess I'm talking about the people who are in charge of the party then.
Yeah, kick them out. They're not going to, you're not going to teach them anything new.
Yeah,
but I like
just
that you
crawl
tease this
inside
out.
of its empty, hollowed out shell and wear it as a suit.
I like that. Oh, okay. I would have gone with a slightly different image, but I like that you tease that out because I think people like you have a actually much more ruthless and cynical perspective than other people who talk in those moralistic terms. That's right. But you got to keep teasing it out.
They're not going to learn.
They're just going to need to lose.
They're going to have to lose in the battle between. Yes. Yeah.
Power. I'm not talking lose to Republicans.
Right.
Lose to us.
All right, let's get to. This is wonderful. Mohammed bin Salman. He is the what is he now? The crown prince
He's
of
the crown prince. He's learning a lot of lessons.
Saudi Arabia. And he is Thomas Friedman loves this dude. In fact, not just Thomas Friedman, right? There was a whole host of like when he came out, and he's got. some there's some reforms, I guess, like if you're a woman, and this is major change for women. You can drive in Saudi Arabia now.
Go to sporting event.
You go to sporting events. Here he is on talking about curbing the powers of Saudi Arabia's religious police. Is this on 60 Minutes?
60 Minutes.
The laws are very clear and stipulated in the laws of Sharia that women wear decent, respectful clothing like men. This, however, does not particularly specify a black abaya or a black head cover. The decision is entirely left for women to decide what type of decent and respectful attire she chooses to wear.
Now, that is great. But, there's always this dynamic. And I remember, like, when the FCC was back in the day, they were making a big show of punishing I can't remember which network it was, when Janet Jackson had a clothing malfunction and people could see her nipple. The FCC was talking about that. Meanwhile, they're completely deregulating the television industry. And there's that dynamic is going on right now. So Crown Prince Solomon is pushing the boundaries of women's, I hate to say rights, like just sort of, but yes, like some basic
bare minimum access.
Yes. Simultaneously, he is also responsible for pushing huge human suffering in Yemen with our help.
Daily refueling by the United States and the UK, but like targeted bombing of hospitals, a cholera outbreak, blocking humanitarian aid and relief. The abuses in Yemen are some of the worst things seen in the world today, led by the Saudi coalition. And
now he's coming to visit the States, right?
He's coming to visit the States. And then just to throw really quick, he's also the far-right proxies in Syria, which we can condemn all sides of that fighting, including the far-right groups that the Saudis back. And also the blockade on Qatar is incredibly reckless. And also in the same interview, he threatened to build an atom bomb and compared the head of Iran to Hitler, which is insane. But I want to also, if I could tag one other Sam Harris point on this, because I can't help it. But like this, though, is a perfect example that if you know anything about this issue, you would make a distinction between Saudi Wahhabism and Islam at large, especially attributing to some of the issues that people like Harris are obsessed with regards to terrorism and fundamentalism. And this shows you even right here that politics and material interest always drive it, because this is a prince who, as part of like a global rebrand as well as a strategy to defeat rivals inside his own family, is reconstituting what religion means inside the most conservative place in the world with regard to state religion.
And doing it so that he has free hand to wreak actual suffering. I don't want to say actual suffering, because I think, women suffer under this, but horrific, violent suffering. And yes, it's sort of the reverse, right? it's just like, you can use that religion or religious emancipation either way, and it's that malleable if there is a broader political agenda that is driving it.
Right.
All right. Speaking of which, in terms of malleable, Peter Thiel, who I guess if this guy became a Supreme Court justice, it wouldn't matter.
Just be forewarned that you're playing with, well, let's just not say fire. How about your whole studio?
This guy, exactly. I know. So this guy is, I don't know, at different times he's supposedly advised Donald Trump. He is financing, God knows what he's financing out there. We talk about alt-right guys. We talk about alt-light guys. I would find it hard to believe that there's not a lot of Peter Thiel money teeming through a lot of the YouTube channels that you see out there. But the man is a titan of industry. And obviously, This is America. You don't get there unless you deserve it. And here is him being asked by Maria Bartiromo a question about what do you like from a policy standpoint about Donald Trump? And here it is, Peter Thiel.
How's he doing now, Peter? Let's talk about policies that you'd like to see coming out of this White House and the policies that we've already seen.
Well, it's. I think that I think there are all sorts. It's very hard to get things to work in this country. There are a lot of the political governing institutions are simply not nearly working as well as they used to. The one thing that I liked about Trump and still very much like about him is a willingness to ask questions, to reframe the debate, and not to be sort of confined by these narrow, politically correct strictures. I've often said that our greatest political problem is the problem of political correctness, and I think there are, any of a number of issues.
Pause it for 1 second. Imagine how remote you are from the deprivation of millions upon millions of people. Imagine how distant the idea of racial or sexual discrimination. Imagine how completely out of touch you have to be to think that the greatest political problem we have is political correctness.
Well, I also liked Matt's little throw off camera, which is like, like commitment to a stratified, wealth-based society, frustration with things not getting done in a democracy. What sort of politics might he be?
Right.
Like a strong desire to ask questions about religious and ethnic minorities. Like, where are we going here?
Right. Well, let's let him continue.
The greatest political problem is the problem of political correctness. And I think there are, any of a number of issues where it is good to rethink things. The very big tax reform that was pushed through at the end of last year, I think, is a very good thing. And it reflects that we're living in a very different world where we have to ask very hard questions about how do you get American companies to compete globally. The last big tax reform was in 1986. Before that, where you sort of had, you sort of simplified and had, sort of uniform taxes. And that made sense in a non-globalized world, which was still much less globalized in 1986. And then by 2017, our tax code was set up in such a way that American businesses were seriously disadvantaged. And
Pause it. I'm just curious, what is the metric of American companies being seriously disadvantaged? I mean, you have our American corporations with literally trillions of dollars in cash. What is the disadvantage here?
He's going to get to it. I think he's saying we haven't eliminated the minimum wage as an example.
Right. I mean, how does that manifest itself like a disadvantage? Is he just saying that executives and
last week I was dining in China and my counterpart
it gets even
said
worse.
that he could eat a child for their blood in public and I have to do that in private, putting me at a significant disadvantage because of political correctness. I hate you.
American businesses were seriously disadvantaged, and this was an incredibly healthy reset. And so I think there are any of a number of topics where it's very good to be asking these questions. And then it's been obviously there are all sorts of things that are somewhat disappointing, and at the same time I don't know how much one can expect. So that's. I think I still think it's better than the alternatives by far.
Mm-hmm. Hillary Clinton.
Yes, or Bernie Sanders.
Or Bernie Sanders.
There you go. You love it. I love that look from Maria Bartiromo, where she's like, I don't know how to make it seem like I could follow what you were saying, so I'm going to just gasp and hope that you say something that I can actually understand, and then I got it, or I figured out that you were saying you just didn't like Hillary Clinton or Bernie Sanders.
I like how political correctness it's now politically correct to say I don't think that major companies should have huge tax cuts.
Yeah, finally.
Hey, corporations are
Finally.
people. They are a marginalized class. Also, I like how he thinks it's a policy to be on PC.
Right.
It's actually just Trump spouting off whatever nonsense enters his head at any given
I'm
point in
like
time.
Socrates. I'm asking questions here.
I'm an instigator of insight.
Here, well, let's do this. This is still the sort of the animating principle for people on the right, and that is, of course, a lot of things bad about Donald Trump, but at least we don't have this political correctness where you don't worry about calling out people who are not white, finally, for all the privilege that they're having in this country, and then, of course, the other organizing principle is Hillary Clinton. And here is, in the wake of McCabe, of FBI Deputy Director McCabe being fired, the sort of like a crossover Super Friends, it's Fox and Friends interviewing Sean Hannity. And here it is.
Comey, to your point, Brian, is probably going to be up against an IG report that is contradicting the things that he's put in the book. If I was his lawyer, I'd say you do have the right to remain silent.
Why is it that they do all of this? McCabe did all of that, and then he says he's innocent. He should get that $1 million pension. Hillary Clinton said that she should have won the election. Meanwhile, she's lying to all of us about the server and destroying her phones. And yet they're blaming Republicans for their wrongdoings. They're the ones that put themselves in this mess.
Right. Ainsley, the only way I can characterize this, it is the biggest abuse of power in the history of this country. For James Comey, when you have so many crimes that Hillary committed, just think about this. If Brian, Steve, Ainsley, any of you, if you were trying to prevent congressional oversight, and you broke the law and you put a server that we now know was hacked by at least 5 or 6 outside foreign entities.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Just let
old
her
habits.
go. God,
old habits
guys.
die
Jesus
hard.
Christ. I mean, like
when we were in 2004, we started at Air America. When we would take phone calls, even as late as like 2006. I remember distinctly recording a sound drop that was we would take from all the callers, all the right-wing callers, and it just went something like this: Clinton, 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 Clinton. This is in 2006. They're talking about Bill Clinton. Clinton, 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 Clinton. So get used to it, folks.
The Clintons do have a way of inspiring a passion in people that in either direction that's completely outsized to anything they've ever done.
It's Clinton, 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 Clinton.
My wife has committed the greatest crimes in human history, and she isn't even president, and you wanted her to be president. Now, meanwhile, we can't team up with Mike Cernovich to stop war. Fuck off.
Beltway Bumpkin. Sam, a councilman here in D.C., claims that Jews can control the weather. My question for you is, can you have John from San Antonio speak to California's weird house races, the possibility they may prevent Dems from regaining control?
Oh, I thought that he wanted to have John talk about the Rothschilds.
Malcontent. Chapo reviewed Dissected Jordan Peterson's book this week. They boiled it down to the secret smushed together with the bell curve. Worth a listen.
That's perfect.
Super Cyan, AMR crew, just tell Sam how I've misjudged him. Anyone with a right side fadeaway can't be completely uncool. Now I'm waiting on the ankle-breaking crossover stories to come out. Really cool. A sliver of emancipation for women is great, but are public beheadings still a thing in Saudi Arabia? Is the yawning wealth gap considered politically correct?
Well, there is. I mean, the thing of it is that in Saudi, they actually, for Saudi citizens, which is an important distinction, there's pretty good social provisions. And there's amazing social, like in the UAE, if you're a UAE citizen, the level of their safety net is mind-blowing. They'll just give you land, healthcare, education anywhere in the world, and like investment capital for a business startup.
Afrin city center has been overtaken by Turkey and FSA goons. Anna Campbell, a woman from Lewes, East Sussex in the UK, was killed there when the convoy she was traveling in was struck by a Turkish missile on March 16th. She's the first British woman volunteer to die defending Syria with the women's protection units. Reporting of it is in The Guardian. Rest in power to all the martyrs of the Rojava Revolution.
Yes, that's an amazing group. PYD moved out of the city. Yeah, it's and you know, we're continuing to. That's another area. We've had all this bitching about Turkey in the Western press. We're still fueling up Turkey's arms race to do this. And by the way, as Erdogan gets more fully himself, and he's like with Putin, a precursor of all of these people, like he's talking about Cyprus again. He's talking about land, I think, in Bulgaria. Like this doesn't stop there. It's Muslim alt-right runs Turkey.
Yeah, if the U.S. really cares about women's rights in the Middle East, they will provide more support to the people fighting in Rojava. I think they're providing a little bit. I'll admit this isn't 100% my area. Michael probably knows more about it.
Provided some.
Your town is next. You're absolutely right about guys like Peterson always having an origin story about being betrayed by women. Just look at Warren Farrell. In the 70s, he was the king of the male feminists, which, yeah, we know is a big red flag. The guy was even director for the National Organization for Women. Then his wife left him, and he became the king of MRAs. He went from writing The Liberated Man, advocating men join the feminist movement, to the myth of male power, claiming that dudes are the real victims in society. Frankly, dipshit frauds like Jordan Peterson owe a lot to the groundwork Farrell laid to co-opt social justice language and foment backlash against equality. MR member, Sam, I spent some time on IMDb over the weekend, and I'm confused. So Rob Morrow was your early stage name? When did you adopt Sam Seder, and what is your real name? Get Out, written and directed by Jordan Peterson. Just wanted to say that I loved the interview, particularly because of all the hilariously upset Peterson fans that showed up in the chat. Especially since they all seemed too terrified to call in. Why? Habers Malo. There are hundreds of social science papers debunking and condemning Murray and Herrnstein. Robinson is just straight wrong on his academics only care about career advancement. His reasoning there is baseless and probably just lazy.
No, he wasn't saying that. He was talking about their muscling their way into the public eye, and who does that. And that's a valid criticism as far as I'm concerned. I wasn't saying that. I didn't read what he said, and I did an illicit history on Murray with him and his point. He actually said a lot of academics debunked Murray, but they weren't in the public realm as much as Murray.
Calling from an 847 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Hey, Sam. It's Josh from Chicago.
Hello, Josh from Chicago. What's on your mind?
I wanted to talk about I know John talked about the Illinois primaries, but I had some things to say about that. So there was a poll that came out, I think yesterday, that showed Kennedy in second with 26%, Pritzker in first with 32%, and Daniel Biss in third with 22%. And for what it's worth, and I think people should support Biss, Kennedy was endorsed by Chuy Garcia and a lot of progressives within Chicago, and he has hit out on Rahm Emanuel's basically strategy of essentially kicking black people out of Chicago so that they can further gentrify Chicago. Yep. And so I would vote for Biss, but I would encourage people to be strategic. And if they feel Kennedy could beat Pritzker, I think beating Pritzker is the top priority, because I think he'd be slaughtered by Rauner in a general election. And there's just way too much baggage, especially with this recent tax thing.
I also heard that there's tapes of him with Blago, maybe. Have you heard that rumor?
Yeah.
There are tapes.
That's not a rumor.
Okay. Well, there you go. I'm always late to the party with these things.
Also, Marie Newman, I think she has a really good shot of actually winning. just because I think it's going to depend on turnout. But there's really no reason, except for the fact that Lipinski is basically from like a legacy, like a political legacy family. There's no reason that he should be representing that district. The district is way more progressive than he is. He's pretty much like he's an anti-choice Democrat. He's basically a Republican. So yeah, I would encourage people to get out and vote for Bitts or even Kennedy. Just make sure Pritzker doesn't win. Yeah, I also had something about the Russia thing, if I could.
All right, got to be quick.
And I guess
got to get to other people.
I was wondering if Michael or Jamie or you read the Jeremy Corbyn op-ed about Russia.
I have not.
No.
I mean, basically what he says is that what we should be attacking Russia on is the fact that this is also just a huge oligarchy, but like people don't attack them on that. It's always, the Russia story here or interference, but the fact that in a sense, Russia is an example of like sort of capitalism and greed just like run amok, and that people don't focus on that.
Yeah, that is a point that often gets lost, I think, when especially liberals talk about Russia in this almost ahistorical way where they conflate Putin's Russia with the Soviet Union.
All right, thanks, Josh. Appreciate the call. Going to a 518 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from? 518.
Hello?
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 Okay. I wasn't sure. I'm calling in from Fire RTC, and I'm not really aware of those area codes.
Yeah, it sounds good.
I understood. I've got to be quick. I had something more lengthy prepared, but maybe another time. So basically,
where are you calling from?
One quick.
Where are you calling from?
My name's Jacob. I'm calling in from Germany.
Calling from Germany. Okay.
Yeah. One advice, maybe as NYC people, you should definitely have a look at Red Vienna and the Ostrom Marxists. There's also a piece in Jacobin about them. I'm currently writing a piece about them, and I thought, especially in urban spaces, there's a lot to be done with progressive grassroots efforts. And Red Vienna in the 1920s is a really great example of that. They built public housing like crazy, and the conservatives they went bananas. They were foaming at their mouths about workers' palaces with indoor plumbing. How dare they do this? And they financed them by luxury taxes on horses and shitty stuff like that, and by progressive taxation. And they really made really great gains, being in power for like 10 years before the right wing, the fascists, smashed most of that gains. But a lot of those gains can still be seen today. For example, artists have a basic artist income, and lots of small clubs are publicly financed, and those are all leftovers from that area. And still, even after fascism and even after all that, there is a really high standard from basically coming from those 10 years in power where a lot has been achieved. So I really want to encourage people all over the world to really go into grassroots efforts in their city, organize. There's a lot that can be done, small things, big things.
This just came up, Red Vienna came up in the Liza Featherstone interview, did it not? That's where from 1919 to 1932, I think it was, and it was the socialists were trying to work on their propaganda, and that's where sort of the first focus groups were contemplated, among other things. But fascinating topic. Appreciate the appreciate.
Yeah, definitely delve into that.
All right, that's a good idea.
I would really enjoy an interview.
Okay, appreciate the
you.
call. Thanks. Calling from a 509 area code. Who's this? Where are you calling from?
Sam, this is Ronald Reagan.
Ronald Reagan, how are you?
Good. I want to tell you a little bit about my Cliff Schecter journey. Last year, if you remember in the past, they used to make mean-spirited phone calls. And those included calls where I would disparage Mr. Schechter. And my New Year's resolution was to be nicer, and I've done a lot of meditating. My mean-spiritedness comes from a deep-seated insecurity. So,
right, I can understand that.
And lately, I've actually started to kind of appreciate Cliff, and I wanted to call and say something nice because that's who I am now. And then I listened to this interview he did with David Frum, and I'm kind of feeling mean-spirited again, and I don't know what to do with that. Like,
are you asking me to write a self-help book of 12 rules in which to live by?
Well, I know this puts you in a weird position, and whatever. I don't really care about that, but he lets Frum, for example, compare Bernie to Trump because Bernie is the left's manifestation of a desire for a messiah. Frum says that about Bernie, and Cliff is just sort of like, yeah. And at the very end, Cliff's like, hey, what about that Iraq thing? And Frum says, well, Iraq was the right thing to do. I would have done it different. And Cliff is like, yeah, good point. Me too. There's some really bad takes in there. I think, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but there's no excuse for bringing people like Frum along to the ride at this point. They should be buried. And if you have the opportunity to interview somebody like that, you should use it to just end their career. I'm sure he has enough money to go retire and live some life.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, we've talked about this a lot. Like, I don't know what the value of. Let me put it this way. I don't know what the value of David Frum is. I definitely know the value of David Frum for anybody who is center to the left is zero. I mean, other than sort of some type of like, I don't know, emotional tonic, right? Like, oh, even that guy who was George Bush's guy, even that guy now sees that they were wrong. Now that the Republicans are lunatics. But the fact of the matter is that the Republican lunacy certainly predates Donald Trump. And it's, a guy like Frum midwifed Donald Trump. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. And so, yeah, it's disappointing.
He's also still, I mean, I just have to say with Frum, I mean, Frum's not, it's not all past tense. I mean, he still is
that's awful what I'm saying. Like, he's not disavowing,
right,
he's not disavowing anything.
I'm not disavowing anything. And in contemporaneously still, pushing, crazy right wing, Likudnik type of stuff when he's not.
That's what I'm saying. He's not disavowing any of his right wing positions. He's just against Trump. And honestly, my 5-year-old is against Trump. Like, he knows, like, Trump is a bad man. I mean, there's really, that's basically what we're hearing from guys like Frum. And I don't need David Frum to tell me this. And if he wants to go on, and if he has some salience in some Republican circles, he should go on Republican shows and do that. And maybe he does, but I don't quite get it. It is, in my mind, it is a sign of ideological, or I don't know, some type of weird, we need, daddy's approval. So they're the same impetus as why, like, Democratic administrations only hire, Republicans for Secretary of Defense or for, whatever it is.
Feel free to shoot this down if this shows a poor understanding of international relations, but this makes me think about what we were talking about earlier with Saudi Arabia, where it's sort of within the bounds of acceptable views to be sort of socially liberal or moderate at home and support some really vile interventionism abroad.
I think it's a different problem. I think in this instance it really is about like people on
West Wing bull.
Yeah.
Love
sort of like this
Saudi
notion
West
of
Wing.
we're coming together with a common purpose, And you know what? He's not. He doesn't have any commonality with you. And there's no validity. And if, I thought that, I haven't talked to Cliff about it, but if I thought that Cliff had him on because he was going to sandbag him or, then, and this is good for creating podcast, excitement, that's another story. But yeah, no, I'm disappointed about it, and I really appreciate you bringing it up. Let's go to...
he didn't even get his jingle.
No, he left. He left.
That's only for the non-mean-spirited.
Another hit and run by Ronald Reagan. All right, I'm running out of gas here a little bit, but let's get to this. Ben Shapiro, speaking of another right-winger who's platformed for absolutely no reason whatsoever, he's still on his Victims of Crimes Should Not Be Heard tour, which is probably the first time the right ever says this, right? I mean, did we hear Ben Shapiro talk about how, what was it, Stacey's Law in California was wrong? This is the immigration, the story of the woman who was supposedly murdered by an undocumented immigrant. And it turns out when he was tried that, in fact, no, he did not kill her. It was some accidental thing where there was a gun that was, that he found and literally just went off. But the idea that the right in this country now believes that being a victim does not give you the opportunity to speak about criminal reform is absurd. It is absurd. But here is Ben Shapiro going on to make that very same argument.
Do you think the agenda that's being pushed is gun control by interviewing students who are scared to go back to school? Is that how you perceive it?
No, I think that the agenda being pushed is gun control if there, again, is no pushback on questions that would be asked to any other guest. I think that tragedy is obviously a terrible thing, but it doesn't necessarily confer expertise, and that's one of the big problems here.
You're very popular, Ben. Do you want to grab that?
Yeah, exactly. Goodness gracious.
It happens to all of us. I wanted to ask you, though, your website, The Daily Wire, a lot of other conservative...
Well, I'm now curious as to what type of expertise you need to simply call for protection for kids in schools. In fact, I would think being a student in a school would give you the exact expertise you would need to know how much you want that protection. But apparently this is a very complex and sophisticated thing that students can't understand. Continue.
Wire, a lot of other conservative media sites that have criticism of the press. I sometimes worry y'all are trying to tear things down as opposed to make them better. It's one thing to critique and want journalism to be better, but sometimes I feel like you're just trying to get rid of journalism altogether.
Questioning the motive I don't think is a useful thing. If you can point out to me where the critique is wrong, I think that's one thing. If the suggestion is that the critique is invalid because the motive is invalid, that's another. So again, I think that if you don't like the motive, then ignore the motive and take the critique insofar as it's effective, right? We all have motives, but the fact is, listen, I don't want CNN to disappear. I don't want the New York Times to disappear. I don't want the Washington Post to disappear. I want them to do what they say they are supposed to be doing. I want them to perform objective journalism if that's what they say they're going to do, and opinion journalism if they want to say that they're opinion journalists. That's fine. My problem is when this is why my critique of, for example, the New York Times op-ed page is far less than my critique of the New York Times objective journalism. There's a difference between op-ed and journalism. It's why my critique of MSNBC sometimes is a lot less strident, I think, than my critique of CNN, because CNN purports to be objective. MSNBC really does not purport to be objective in the same way.
Part of me thinks that you and your colleagues at the Daily Wire should try to get jobs then at the New York Times. If you don't like the coverage, try to be a part of the solution as opposed to complaining about it.
I don't know. Would you hire me? I really doubt that. And not only that,
I wanted you as a guest for many months.
I'll be frank with you. I make a lot of money.
I wanted you as a guest for many months.
All right. The amount of nothingness that was discussed there is stunning, but the idea that the right has been attacking journalism as an institution has been ongoing for at least multiple decades. At least. And they are not attacking the specific journalistic institutions. They are attacking journalism.
I don't know.
I do. The left has in all throughout. I mean, the entire the growth of blogs was a function of critiquing the specific journalism, not the idea of journalism. The intellectual foundations of the conservative movement is to attack science, is to attack any type of objective reality. They said as much during the Bush administration, where you folks are part of the reality-based community, they would argue.
I think Stelter kind of asked the wrong question, though. Like, when we're talking about, like, what I love so much about Nathan Robinson is he really is going through and responding to these people's points. And Stelter could have done that, but instead he took it to another place entirely.
Well, yeah, the whole conversation was so theoretical and not even grounded into, why not say, like, when you critique the New York Times in this way, answer that. I mean, they're both talking about nothing. And the idea that you would pursue Ben Shapiro, for what end? For what end? But there it is, folks.
I thought Alex Jones's response to
exactly
it's much more interesting. Devil. Here's the devil. You are the enemy. It's a goofy looking picture of Stelter. Anti-Semitism's funny. Yeah, can we play this?
Little comic relief.
Let's go to the phones.
You don't want to touch this?
All right, well,
before we sign off.
Hold on. Call him from a 330. We'll get to that, Stetler. 330.
Hello?
Hello?
Hi, this is Mike from Nashville.
Hi, Mike.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. What's on your mind?
Hi, yeah. I just wanted to let you know so kind of a long story, but I'll keep it short.
Please.
I wanted to call in about the blockchain stuff after you had it, but the next day was the Parkland shooting, I believe, and today is really the first day I think I've had time to listen live. I think the coverage you did was pretty good, but I don't think you really covered what the biggest issue with blockchain is. So I'm a grad student. I've written a couple papers on it, actually. And what people don't understand with when it comes to blockchain is that the blockchain is public. So it's like every single one of us sharing the exact same copy of a checkbook. And on the top of the checkbook, you have the ledger where it shows all the transactions. And so there's a lot of shenanigans that can go on for trying to obfuscate who made what transaction and all this other stuff. But there's a huge amount of privacy concerns. And I think that's really the aspect that people need to understand. Like, the big usage of blockchain and cryptocurrencies and whatnot when it first started was for quote unquote anonymous transactions on the Silk Road and whatnot. So I think that's an interesting topic. I'm trying to cut it short because I know you're trying to go, right. But I can call back in and describe it better if you want at another time.
Interesting. I mean, I think, like, I certainly got the idea of it being a sort of a publicly shared ledger, but I guess to a certain extent what you're saying is that there's also an inherent danger in that. Is that, I mean, broad?
Yeah. There's different types, and not all of them do mining, and so there's different degrees of how you would want to use it. So,
all right, well, look,
in a supply chain, it would work well, or something like that. But today's not great.
Okay, no, I get what you're saying. All right, well, I appreciate the call. The limitations of blockchain are probably set by those privacy concerns, but like you say, if you're doing activities that aren't so sensitive but need coordination, a big benefit. All right, we got time for another call. Calling from a 347 area code. Who's this?
Sam, it's Lefty Uno from Virginia.
Lefty Uno, what's on your mind?
Sam, I may not be as a prolific caller as, say, Reagan or Mindy or John because, frankly, I'm not as, quote, funny as Reagan. I'm not as interesting as Mindy, and I'm not as mind-numbingly knowledgeable as John. But I do have my opinion from time to time. And my opinion today is about the Fox and Friends segment earlier, denigrating Jim Carrey. Now, I really don't care about Jim Carrey or his art, although that Sarah Huckabee Sanders picture was pretty spot on.
Yeah, that was.
So I don't see how. Go ahead.
So you just wanted to give kudos to Jim Carrey. Is that what I'm getting?
No, not so much. I just think I find it funny when celebrities, entertainment people, voice their opinions about religion or politics. Everybody wants to be like, oh, shut up and do whatever it is that you get paid to do. But regular people on Twitter, or especially they read tweets from regular people on that segment, and it's like, how do their opinions matter more than somebody else's opinion?
Right. Well, Jim Carrey is wrong. I guess
I get it.
Well, yeah, but here's the thing, is that I think you're taking all of that Fox stuff just a little bit too seriously, because if they could get like Burt Bacharach to come on, Fox and Friends in the morning and say something critical of anybody on the left, they would take him in a heartbeat. I mean, do you remember
that would be a real? I go like, and Burt Bacharach says black people are weird. Coming up.
No, honestly, I am.
That's a great Fox segment.
I am quite convinced if you watch that show on a regular basis, you will come to something like that. I don't want to malign Burt Bacharach. I just the first name that popped into my head, like Bo Derek, for years was like hailed as a intellectual pillar of the Republican Party because she was the only celebrity they could find who would be supportive.
Scott Baio.
Now it's Scott Baio. I mean, how many times has Scott Baio been on frickin' Fox News over the years? So yes, I get your point, but I do think that you may want to take them with just a slightly bigger grain of salt. All right, let's take a couple IMs, and I got to get going because I'm going to pass out. Taco truck. Federal court throws out Republican challenge. Pennsylvania redistricting. Also, when is the next live audience show? That's a good question. We got to do that soon. Contagious chameleon between Jordan Peterson type of unfavorably view politics and evangelicals holding Jesus higher than the law. I feel like there's an avenue available to deactivate a lot of right-wing voters by convincing them that voting is useless. Classless creative. Peterson's like a rambling Joseph Campbell without the charm. I'm waiting for weeping pseudo-intellectual with 1,000 faces. Donald Trump. Sam, your broad determination at the root of Jordan Peterson's social angst is rooted in prior traumatic experiences. Bang on. My best guess is girlfriend left him for a poor black man that she met at one of those paper and stick demonstrations. Immediately following this, he went out for Chinese food to placate his fragile snowflake ego and ended up with a discouraging fortune in his fortune cookie. The day from hell concluded when the escort he ordered ended up rocking a twig and berries and not a clam. Oh, my gosh. Angel, Sam, my grandma died yesterday after a short fight with bone cancer. I'm sorry to hear that. Thankfully, peacefully in her sleep. I could use a kind word and a good laugh from my favorite failed comedian and his woke hype man. Maybe Michael can reenact the Jimmy Dore debate as both you and Jimmy. Love you guys. Thanks for being a light in dark times. Get well. Thank you. I'm really sorry.
On the Supreme Court, and it's going to be bad. So let me explain it to you again, Jimmy. It's the Supreme Court. Well, here's my theory: is that the fucking court. Okay, sure, things could happen. There could be a fucking Jupiter could invade us. You don't fucking know. My point is that Hillary Clinton is a fucking bitch, and I hate her. And this whole business angle's worked out really well for me. Jimmy, I'm committed to alienating even people that don't deserve it. So if you don't think I won't hold a lifelong vendetta against you, you have another thing coming. Well, I'm put my mental illness up against anybody. So fuck that.
This is our new podcast. Michael does 7.
It's like fan fiction. I can start doing like every character in the universe, like Cernovich and I, like meeting at a bar.
That's actually the only fan request like that I've ever acquiesced to. Like, people get really feel like, what if Nation of Islam Obama met Sam and they were at a Laker game and then Jimmy came, but then there would be Bill Clinton, Jimmy. Go.
Yeah, that's a special reward. Very special patrons only.
That's like $5,000 a month.
Polly Themerson. I'm not crying. This is part of my journey where my large eye is crushed and my Cyclops brother asks, who did this? And I say, no one. No one did this. Ryan from Ohio. I mentioned Sam Harris in passing to one of my philosophy professors once, and he got really serious. He said that Harris has done a lot of damage to the public perception of the free will argument and stopped just short of calling him a moron. Needless to say, he's one of my favorite teachers. Tom Cat. Hi, Sam. Glad to see that MR shares my love for Nathan J. Robinson, both generally and for his epic crucifixion of Peterson. Have you guys seen the Guardian piece on Powder Mountain Millennial Elite? I got to say, their altruism is so inspirational, it made me nauseous. And they clearly worship the gospel of Wyatt Ingram Coke. It's recommended reading. Thank you. We'll check that out. Sam's right side fadeaway. In another country, Trump attacks on political enemies in the DOJ and the FBI would be described as an autocrat consolidates power. The report that GOP officials coordinated with the State Department to purge Democratic career employees also supports this framing. Please give some courage to the right-wing domestic terrorists that got caught in Michigan. They're rabidly pro-Trump and part of an organized group. Sam's Tinder profile. Hey, girl, swipe right. My JCC jump shot is just as good as Jordan Poole from Michigan. Seder, don't even know her. The problem with identity politics is not its validity, but its strategic vulnerability. ID politics paints bright lines on societal fissures for SCL and IRA to exploit. For instance, Russian social media propaganda may have been able to demotivate black voters enough for Trump to win. Maybe. I mean, there's this. I do think that there are people who sort of impose so-called social identity politics, but it also comes out of particularly from people who share that social identity, from a real sense of not having our politics do anything for them. And so your implication is as if it's this sort of construct that people have just created, as opposed to the implication almost like it's this construct that white people have created on behalf of black people, or that men have created on behalf of women, rather than the idea of like, wow, there's this group of people who have been dispossessed for an extended period of time and under either racial or sexual lines, and they have achieved enough power in our society through technology or just advancements in society that we now actually hear them on a consistent basis, and we hear their message and their set of grievances, which I think nobody disagrees with. So, if you're saying that political professionals should use a different set of demographics or whatnot, that's a different argument. But the idea that so-called identity politics are just sort of like this construct that is imposed upon people, as opposed to there being any type of organic development, is I don't know. I think that's your myopia. No grope zone. Suppose the president made recordings and it came to light that he secured a loyalty oath from Neil Gorsuch. If the Dems ever won a big majority, should they vote to impeach? Yeah, I would think so. But I don't know how that would happen, but yes. Censor sweep. The title of today's YouTube stream is misleading. Imagine my shock when I discovered you weren't interviewing Dr. Peterson, but were instead misinterpreting his writing. To be serious for a moment, what really got me through my first teenage breakup was learning set theory and linear algebra. All right.
Loser.
All right. 4 more IMs, and then we're out of here. Magnus Colin. The field of economics has been taking quite a beating on your show lately. Remember that neoclassical economics is a small portion of economic thought, regardless of how popular it is in the country. The econ department where I got my degree was referred to as a den of communism by our Governor Lepage. Melissa Meaner. Hi, Sam. We have a small town hall coming up with 3 Democrats running for governor of Massachusetts. They're all for Medicare for all, which is awesome. I like Seti Warren best, but so far, do you or the team have any suggestions or questions we can ask them to glean who's really the most progressive?
I would ask, I would actually ask Elizabeth Warren. Maybe you don't have to frame it antagonistically.
No. This is for governor.
Oh, I'm sorry. I misheard that. Governor in what race?
Massachusetts.
Oh.
They're just asking more generically, like if there's like some
Single
type
payer.
of silver bullet question. Well, they're all for Medicare for all.
I don't know.
I don't know. I think it would be something unique to Massachusetts, and I don't know if there's still that Proposition 13 or 3, which really debilitated public schools while I was there. I don't know if that's still going on, but
expropriate the means of production, yay or nay?
Do you think that we should take all of Peter Thiel's possessions and make him homeless?
2 more. Podfish. Great discussion on Peterson and hack social psychologists in general. It seems there's a strong correlation between not having one's identity questioned, the lack of sense of identity fuels claims identity politics are invalid, as well as cultural identity crisis. Also, I want Michael to do an impression of Josh from Chicago capturing Peter Thiel to reharvest the blood of innocence. That's going to have to wait. Mr. Quality Control, the final IM of the day. This thing is just completely trashed. Michael, your Thiel is a little too confident and needs a little more of his socially anxious stammer. See you tomorrow.
It might take all the strength I got to get to where I want, but I know somehow I'm gonna get there. I wasn't looking when I just got caught between the truth and the light bulb. But finding out won't make me feel any better. Yeah, I know the clock is ticking, but the meds are gonna kick in, and my pilot light shining bright. I get somewhere the choice was made, for the option where you don't get paid, for the road that bends before it finally breaks you. I guess somehow I lost my drive,